Welcome to the first episode of Tech Talk with Gomer the Gamer. In this segment, we will look at some of the topics that are trending in tech news at the end of February 2021. We'll hopefully make this sort of an ongoing thing. No schedule set as of yet, but we will try to maybe put some stuff out. One of my cohorts, who is also big into the tech industry, might be doing some co-recordings with him in the future once COVID things calm down a little bit and we are able to hang out with each other without having to muffle our voices in front of the microphone. You know, we want to make things as bearable for everybody who's trying to listen to this as possible. I guess one of the biggest news things in the computer realm for 2021 has been the lack of hardware availability. Towards the ends of 2020 and still to the end of February here, last day of February 2021, new model CPUs and graphics cards from all manufacturers very, very difficult to find unless you are willing to pay scalper prices. And apparently there are a few people who are willing to do this because eBay and marketplaces are simply flooded with severely overpriced bits of hardware. So hopefully maybe we can give you some insights into ways around that if you are looking at building, repairing, or upgrading a computer during these times. Last year, AMD exploded into the CPU world, finally producing a processor that could outperform Intel's top offering in gaming. The AMD Ryzen 5 5600X is a 6-core, 12-thread processor based on their Zen architecture that they've been working on for the last few years. Runs an AM4 socket motherboard, works natively with the 500 series AMD chipset, so the A520, B550, and X570 series motherboards. This processor is set at an MSRP of $299. However, it is sold out constantly. You can find it at much higher prices. I have seen it very recently on Newegg from certain sellers, not from Newegg, but from partner sellers, in excess of $450. So if you absolutely have to have it, you can get it for about $150 over MSRP, which I recommend against. If you can wait, definitely wait. The other option is using that refresh button. Occasionally, Amazon will come into some stock. Some of the Amazon sellers are coming into stock of the 5600X, 5800X, and rarely the 5900X processor. Those other two chips are 8-core 16-thread and 12-core 24-thread, respectively. And they are popping up at very, very close to MSRP. The latter of which is the more expensive one, should be close to $550, under $600. So if you can find those on Amazon, hitting the refresh button, a few times a day, that is a great way to snag one at or near MSRP. Also, AMD's own website has a retail store that is currently offering all of their new 5000 series processors. They are still offering some of their 3000 series that are still in stock. They are also offering another big slam to the industry, the new Radeon 6000 series graphics cards. These stormed in late in the season last year, showing Nvidia that there is some competition in town. Radeon has not been a contender against the Nvidia graphics cards for several years now. But apparently whatever Lisa Su has those folks doing at AMD, she has lit a fire, and they are turning and burning. The 6000 series cards are basically head-to-head competition for the top tier cards that Nvidia currently has out. The AMD 6800, 6800 XT, and 6900 XT are direct competitors for the Nvidia 3070, 3080, and 3090 RTX cards, which is extremely exciting. And they are doing that at a bit of a price savings. The 6900 XT is the direct competitor of the NVIDIA RTX 3090, and it's very, very uptight, close trading blows, but for about $500 less MSRP, $400 to $500 less. And so a very, very viable option for a top-tier flagship gaming graphics card. Pretty much the only thing right now that Nvidia can offer with their video cards that AMD does not is the high-end ray tracing, which gives you the accurate shadows, reflections, lighting, things like that. And then in conjunction with that, the Radeon cards do not offer anything as far as what Nvidia calls their DLSS, which is kind of an upscaling tool where the card will render whatever the output, like a game, it'll render the game at a much lower resolution, and then it uses some of Nvidia's deep learning technology to then upscale the graphics to match whatever your monitor's display settings are. So, say 4K, the game may render at 1080, which is 1/4 the amount of pixels as a 4K display. And so it's actually rendering only 1/4 the amount of pixels, and then using its DLSS technology, it upscales that 1080 to 4K, and it's really, really hard to tell the difference. And what that does is it gives you much higher frames per second without pushing the hardware to its limits. You can set the game at 4K and then run certain graphic settings, set an FPS benchmark with that, and then if you go in and turn on DLSS, it can change the way it perceives the game down to something like a 1080 and then boost it up to the 4K. Visually to your eye, it is very hard to tell the difference, but the frames per second that you're getting on your monitor is much, much higher, which gives an excellent gaming experience, especially in more demanding titles, like some of the new Call of Duties that offer the ray tracing and whatnot. Huge improvements with DLSS in those. And right now, the new monster benchmark is Cyberpunk 2077. If you can get around the security issues that they recently had and still play this game, visually it is stunning. Graphically, it is demanding. And so having a card with DLSS is absolutely essential if you play at high resolutions and still want to be able to run those high detail and graphics settings. But using just some brute force, the AMD cards are still putting up a pretty good fight. You may have to choke a few things back to get nice frames per second, but just through sheer horsepower, those new AMD Radeon cards definitely showing that AMD is up for the fight, and they're not going to be backing down. But just like the CPUs, new video cards are also nearly impossible to get a hold of unless you find them from a scalper on eBay or a marketplace with ridiculous prices. I myself am looking towards an RTX 3080 from Asus. I'd like the Asus Tough Edition. It's matching a theme that I'm doing in an upcoming build. I actually need two of these cards. Their MSRP is about $860. I can only find them for about $1,300 to $1,400 US dollars, which is pretty rough, and I absolutely will not pay a 60% markup because I can almost get two cards for that from MSRP. And considering the card that I'm currently running is a GTX 1080, it's still holding its own. It's showing its age a little bit since I do Photoshop and things like that, but in most of the games that I play, it still allows me to turn stuff up pretty high. And I'm only running a 60 hertz monitor, so anything over 60 FPS is actually a loss to me anyway, because my monitor can't even tell the difference. So that I'll be, sticking with my 1080 until stock comes back up, demand goes back down, scalpers can no longer sell their stuff at ridiculous prices, and the cards will start coming back down closer to that MSRP, and we may even get some used cards on the market by then, which I am okay buying used cards. The 1080s that myself and my wife use were both bought secondhand. Anytime I buy them, I immediately take the coolers off of them, apply new thermal compound. I make sure that the cooling putty over the memory modules and the VRM modules are good. I make sure the fans spin freely. The heatsink fins are nice and clean. I actually put the heatsink in the dishwasher, and so it gets a good scrub down and is nice and clean and dry. And my cards perform extremely well, even though they've lived pretty hard lives, getting run all the time. And a 1080, that's a fairly old card. That's 2 generations old. And the 10 series, the 1000 series Nvidia cards, they went on for quite a while before we got the 20 series RTX cards. So, to have a 1080, especially 2 that were among the earlier released, I could tell by the system BIOSes that they were running when I got them that they are a little bit older cards. They're holding up. That's actually another viable option if you're unable to find one of these cards for somewhere near MSRP. Looking on the used market for something that's maybe a couple generations old isn't the end of the world. Gamers Nexus, Steve Burke, he's a YouTube page that I follow closely. They do the most in-depth testing of PC hardware of pretty much anybody out there right now. Very highly respected. They use scientific method on all of their testing. They actually publish their testing methodology so people can read to see exactly how they are testing. Pretty much the same thing that a research facility doing medicine would do. And so these guys, they test their stuff meticulously, they record everything meticulously, and they put everything that they test through exactly the same procedures, using the same methods, with the same hardware, in the same conditions, and that way all of the hardware they test can be directly compared to one another. And something that they have been doing recently is getting a hold of older cards to see how they perform in today's world, running modern AAA games, modern popular titles. And they can tell you this is what we're finding them for in the aftermarket or in the used markets. And a lot of cards, you'd be surprised. They were going as far back as the 900 series from Nvidia. They just recently tested a GTX 960, both the 2GB and 4GB variant of that card, and it held up fairly well. It wasn't a powerhouse when it came out, but it was a good mainstream card. The 60 series of the Nvidia cards, pretty much any of the 60 series that they've made, are generally their most popular cards because of their lower price point and their ability to play most of the stuff that's out there for most people. They also tested the GTX 980 and the 980 Ti as well. Both of those cards performed extremely well. And you can find those cards pretty frequently on eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace for under $150 for a card that's been well maintained, is nice and clean, and will handle a lot of what you'd want to do. And considering how hard it is to find a lot of these newer cards, or how some of the later generation used cards have been severely overpriced due to the lack of new cards, something that's a couple generations older like that is a very, very safe option. That's why we've elected to go ahead and stick with our 1080s that we've been using for several years now. The market is just not wise to jump into something brand new unless you can get lucky and find one pop up for sale for that split second, and you just so happen to be the one that gets your credit card entered before the other guy does. Just this week, Nvidia launched its 3060, again the 60 series, that is following up to their 3060 Ti, 3070, 3080, and 3090 cards. They expected this one to be very, very popular because of its lower price point, but within 10 minutes, every single online retailer that carried 3060 cards, regardless of the manufacturer, such as Asus or Gigabyte, Zotac, any of those guys, all of them completely sold out, and immediately they popped up on eBay at double, triple, and sometimes 4 times the MSRP. So it's unfortunately a pretty rough market right now when it comes to looking for new parts. So all I can say, look at direct from manufacturers. That has been a fairly good way to get things, especially processors. AMD does update their page, and I don't think a lot of people know to go direct to places like AMD to get their parts, and so you'll see some chips pop up on there, and they'll stay for sale. They'll stay in stock for a few hours. And so if you can remember to check that site a few times a day, you may be lucky to snag the chip that you're looking for at exactly MSRP, and that is direct from the manufacturer, so you don't have to worry about retail markups or anything like that. It'll get shipped directly to you from AMD, and you're getting exactly what you want. The correct pricing and a great little piece of hardware. There's been a little bit of side news as far as Nvidia's 3060 launch. They are claiming that they are putting a little bit of code into their BIOS and driver software for the 3060 that will make the card less viable for cryptocurrency miners, people who are mining Litecoin, such as Ethereum. Unfortunately, this has not shown to be nearly as effective as Nvidia hoped it would be. A couple of card testers were able to get the card and run it mining these Litecoins, and they were still saying that they were seeing profits even with the choked back performance that was coming direct from Nvidia. To go alongside that, Nvidia is actually launching an entire series of mining cards that don't even have graphics outputs. They strictly will do nothing but mine for Litecoin such as Ethereum. Unfortunately, this does a couple of things to the market that's against better judgment, in my opinion. I know there's a lot of other tech tubers out there who are of a similar mind as me. One, those direct-to-miner cards, since they have no graphic output and they're locked down to do nothing but mining, as soon as they are no longer a viable card for mining, they are instantly tossed, which means landfill/recycle bin. And I think that is incredibly wasteful, especially with the amount that they are looking to produce to try to offset the amount of miners that are purchasing normal graphics cards. And two, in the past, great deals have often been scored when a graphics card is no longer viable as a Bitcoin mining card. The people who are using those will often post hundreds of these cards for sale on used marketplaces at great prices simply because they need to unload a ton of these cards. And as long as they haven't been overheated, the more modern of those cards, those are actually safe to purchase and use as a daily driver for your gaming rig, your kid's gaming rig, an HTPC, or even heavier workloads such as rendering Adobe video and things like that. I have run several cards in the past that were used in Bitcoin mining, and the cards treated me very well. The worst I had was a fan failure in one of them. 3 simple screws, a $20 part, back up and running. Card still stayed cool after that, performed wonderfully well, was even able to overclock it a little bit, and that was after about 2 years of that card running 24 hours a day as a Bitcoin mining card. And so, you know, people are like, oh, it's been run hard because it's been a mining card. The thing is with modern hardware, there's so many safety catches built into them, into the system BIOS of the card, into the cooling systems, the voltage regulation. All of that stuff has been really ramped up to improve the safety to protect the card. If the card has something like a fan failure, it'll start regulating how fast it's doing its calculations, and it'll actually start choking that back a little bit. It'll start throttling itself in order to keep the temperature down. And it's what it does is it keeps that temperature below the safety threshold to where damage could actually occur to the silicone within the chip. For most of the modern cards, that's around 90 to 95 C is when those will kick in and start choking back. I recently had this happen on my GTX 1080. The fan header for the cooler on my video card got bumped, became disconnected, and I didn't notice it. I actually gamed on that card playing iRacing, World of Warcraft, and streaming with OBS for over a week. And I was just starting to notice that, hey, this isn't quite performing like it did a while back. What's going on? Some investigation found that my fans had come unplugged, and simply plugged them back in. My temperatures dropped, my performance took off again, and the card still self-overclocks like it used to. There's been no degradation to the silicone due to the heat because it kept itself below 90 C even with no cooling active on that thing. Was very impressive. And that's a 2-generation old video card. You know, they're at the 3000 series now with Nvidia. That's a 1000 series card. So a card that old already had that technology in it. Buying a used mining card, it's going to have that technology if it's just now coming onto the market as a used mining card. 1060s, GTX 1060 6GB cards, excellent cards. Once the price comes down a little bit, you know, a lot of miners use those because those 60 series cards are great bang for the buck. They use a little bit less power than the bigger cards do. They're not as expensive overhead, which means the person using them for mining recoups their money quicker, and they won't demand as much of a high price when they go to sell them because they made their money back already. They don't really care about what they get for the card. They've already made their money on it. So it's a great way to get a decent piece of hardware, and as long as you check it over when you're buying it, make sure the fans spin freely, make sure the dust is minimal within the heat sink. Some of these folks that run these mining farms are pretty savvy, and they may go as far as actually, you know, popping the cooler off of there and reapplying new thermal compound and whatnot before selling the card, which in my eyes says that yes, they're trying to get you a quality piece of hardware. They don't want you calling them 2 months later saying, hey, that card you sold me is already dead, you know, because that can go against them as an online seller, especially on places like eBay where it's easy to post reviews about a seller. And so, you know, not as dangerous as people like to make it out to be. I've had a lot of hardware in the past that was mining hardware, and that hardware treated me great for a lot of years. So that's another good place to look right now, especially in the graphics cards realm, because they are so hard to find and because prices are so astronomically elevated. That used market is going to be your gold spot right now. So just kind of the best advice, be patient. Unless you're sitting on just bags of money, which most of us are not, use that refresh button. Pick the sites that you like to shop from, like Newegg, Amazon. Try direct to the manufacturer. I know EVGA has a wonderful website for shopping, and they will take orders according to when you placed your order. So they actually create you a ticket, and when a card becomes available, they will notify you and say, hey, your card is ready, would you like to purchase it now? And they'll give you a full day to respond. If you don't respond, they'll go ahead and pass to the next guy. And so they're actually doing a great job right now. If you can get your name in there and then keep an eye on your email and your notifications that, oh, my card is available, sling some money at them, they get your card shipped out to you, and that has been working. People are getting cards from EVGA, which in my opinion is one of the top tier for quality as far as Nvidia cards go. So they're getting MSRP prices, quality cards, and you don't have to worry about getting skipped over, and it lowers the stress a little because you're not constantly having to refresh all these shopping pages to try to get a good card at the proper deal. So just a little bit of 2 cents when it comes to that type of stuff. I've been in the tech industry for 20 years now, actually actively in the tech industry doing PC building, PC repair, and the last year and a half have been about the craziest that I can remember, as far as availability problems and the craziness of scalping and bot purchases and scams online. There's been so many scams, and it's really good if you can have a little bit of patience, do a little bit of research. You could end up saving yourself, depending on what hardware you're after, thousands of dollars, enough to build another system in some cases. So definitely have the patience, shop around, and if you do have questions about what hardware you should actually be looking at, or if a piece of hardware that you found is good for what you want to do, don't hesitate to send us a message here at Gomish Technologies. We try to answer as many as we can, and both myself and the other technician that'll be reading those messages, we've both been in this industry for a very, very long time, and we'll be able to get you answers that will be helpful. They'll get you moving forward and hopefully get a rig, up and running for you. And if you just want to not worry about any of that hassle and you just want a rig with the lowest possible stress level, talk to us about maybe getting one set up for you. Tell us what you want that PC for. We can help pick the parts that you want. The markups that we have are absolutely rock bottom minimum. Generally, we charge pretty much just some labor for doing the assembly. And if you're local to us, we'll even bring it to you directly. There won't even be any shipping if you're within about 75 miles of our main locations around Omaha, Nebraska. So we've shipped cases, systems that we've built all the way across the United States. Most recent big purchase went to an iRacing driver in Virginia, and they are now enjoying their new racing rig in the iRacing scene, getting out there and hitting the track, heating the tires up and having some fun, being powered by a Gomish Technologies computer. So again, any questions, hit us up here on the page, leave us a message, check some of the posts. We try to post advice when we can, little tidbits of information to just make your tech life a little bit easier, and that way you don't have to do the digging. That's our job. Until next time, this is Gomer Gamer signing off from Gomish Technologies.